Hello everyone, welcome to my review of the Poe Dameron X-Wing. Now, out of the sequel trilogy, there's a lot of iffy stuff that has come out, but definitely one of the better things, both material-wise and to come from LEGO, is going to be this here Poe Dameron's X-Wing, because the black and orange work really well together and have really formed something of an interesting X-Wing. Now, there's nothing wrong with the classic white and red of the original X-Wings. However, this one is just stunning and acts as both a great playset and display set. So let's jump into it with some of the minifigures. Now, our first minifigure here is going to be Poe Dameron in his flight suit. Now, the interesting is many people have a bit of an issue with the sequel trilogy. I think it's movie-wise not that great. There's definitely a lot of problems with it. But set-wise for LEGO, I think they've definitely had some good sets. And then there's definitely some that we'd prefer not to mention. But in this case, we do have a nice set here. Now, this flight suit here is very interesting and well detailed. Surprisingly, these minifigures have a decent amount of detail put into them. Now, he does have his flight suit here, which is mostly just this like burned orange, which does look very good as a flight suit. He does have a little bit of gray detailing for all his straps that he's going to need so that his flight suit is well adjusted for combat. He also does have himself a combat vest there in white with the Resistance logo in the little corner there, and he also has himself a breathing apparatus with the black tube that goes down and over to his knee there, with a lot of subtle detail that's a little bit hard to describe with words, but I think your eyes can speak numbers on what's going on there. Now, the helmet here is very interesting, as it does something that was that they attempted to do with the Resistance, not the Rebel pilots, but they couldn't quite do it because it required the helmets to be really bulky. But for the Resistance helmets here, it works really well because you can have that visor, which is in yellow there, on the helmet itself, and then you don't have to have a secondary face where you have the visor located and then another one where it isn't. So we can actually have double-sided faces without having to do the visor, which is very good. Here, Poe is pretty happy. You know, he gets to fly around with his X-Wing. He has a little bit of a stubbly beard there as well, with his helmet being a black color with a little bit of red on the other side, with the Resistance logo again surrounded by a bit of silver. Very good looking minifigure, with the side of the helmet actually having a lot of little details put in there with the red and the white, which normally isn't really seen for these types of helmets, but here we have an exception. With the back having an angrier face and also a little bit less detail, which is a bit unfortunate, but if he's sitting in his X-Wing, that's not going to be too bad. But he does have a belt to kind of support the flight suit, and then also the back of that combat vest for while he's fighting, either on the battlefield in his X-Wing or just on the ground because, well, he hasn't had enough time to get in there. We also get his faithful companion in BB-8, which is definitely one of the better characters to come out of the sequel trilogy. Definitely one of the ones that people wanted, especially when they made the buildable character. I didn't end up purchasing the buildable character, but I still do have the minifigure of him due to this set, of course. Now, there's a lot of little silver detailings around him in these little compartments of his spherical body, but they're also lined with a bit of orange to kind of give him that orangish color that he normally has. His head is a bit simpler. It does use that dome featuring, but it does have his lens and then also some more orange and silver detailing so that he looks absolutely gorgeous with that coloring there. He is a little bit out of focus now, but still very beautiful minifigure. Good to see him in the set to help Poe with that X-Wing. It is definitely interesting that they chose to include another pilot in the set. However, it isn't unwelcome because although they do have the same flight suit, so we don't need to get into that detailing, they do have a completely different coloration for the helmet. Now, it still does have the red, but the black is replaced with white, and the Resistance logo, which was previously in red, is now black. So there's a little bit of differentiation there, which is quite nice. Now, this face here that they're giving off is a little bit more stern. Poe is a bit more happy to, get their rounds in with the X-Wing. However, this pilot does not have their own X-Wing, so they're a little bit upset at the moment. However, let's see if that changes. But before that reveal is made, we do have some interesting developments as the side of the helmet is way more detailed than Poe's helmet, which is pretty interesting. Still has some of the same similar detailings, but a lot more color variance here. We have some introduction of black, we have some red, we also have a little bit more of that white integration, and it just overall looks very good on the helmet, adding that extra paint to really spice up the look of this pilot, which in all reality, they're not a named character. They're just someone that just waltzed in here. And it's good to see that there's some good distribution of resources on kind of just getting everybody to feel well crafted instead of just one character getting all the attention and then everybody else just having no printing whatsoever. But on the topic of that, they don't have any other head features, which is a bit unfortunate, but still good to see that they still have some detailing rather than none. So at least there's that. And finally, we get ourselves a bit of a mechanic. Now, we typically don't really see these types of characters here in and about where it's just like specifically a mechanic's role, but it's good to see one here. We've got the mechanical cart to kind of go along with this set, so we might as well have someone to use it. Now, they do have a dark olive coloring for their uniform there, which is most likely an apron, just so that they kind of don't get their regular clothes messed up, which is in the appearance of like a dark gray shirt there, due to the mainly being able to see that through the arms there, but we can see a little bit of it underneath the torso. Now they also do have some white detailings over on the chest and also the knees, which is pretty nice. It kind of adds a little bit of color difference in there, which is good to see. It adds a little bit of a focus point towards the center there, so they kind of stand out in a way, which is good to see. You always want to be able to find your minifigures instead of wondering, where did I put this one for like the 50th time? So that's always good. They do have a nice little belt there, which kind of moves around a little bit, which adds a little bit of interest to the character. Now, they are a bit of an alien species, so that's why their head looks a little bit different. Maybe a little bit of a gecko, who knows? But they are a little bit questionable in their expression. It might be like a little bit of a mouthpiece there, kind of just like so that they don't get any of the mechanical bits, like some oil in their mouth, or just, while they're working, they have a little bit of stuff there. They do have an interesting helmet, though, with a combination of that olive with some white and some orange, which just looks really good and, ties the character well together. Having that splash of orange really adds a little bit of difference with most of these faded colors, and it works well with the white as well, which is good to see. Now on the back, they just have the continuation of their apron with no second head, but you can see that the orange splotches don't continue all the way down. They stop at a little bit and just continue with the green in kind of a triangular pattern, which is pretty interesting. Now, we do have a little bit of some small side builds here. We do, of course, have one ladder, which you can put to the side of your X-Wing so that you can have someone climb up it, which is pretty nice. But you also get this here mechanical cart, which is pretty nice. You can put your mechanic here. You can put the wrench on either somewhere around here, because there are a few ledges, or carry around some pilots as in the thumbnail. You can keep some of your extra little studs there for your stud shooters, because we do have some of those on either side of Poe's X-Wing. You do also have a slot for all of those extra spring-loaded shooter missiles, which is pretty nice. You can just clip them on there and you're good to go, as well as having some extra space for those spring-loaded shooters, or not spring-loaded shooters, the stud shooters there. So if you don't want to have them piled up on the side, you can just fit a few in the crate and then just leave the rest of them somewhere else. So it's really up to you how you want to organize this cart here. It's pretty simple, but it's better to have something than nothing. But we do have more important things to cover, specifically this X-Wing here. Now, it does primarily have black coloring, where there's a little bit of drip into the orange to kind of subside with this orange stripe that goes all the way down the chassis into the wings, where we can see a little bit of a rim around the engines there, while also having a bit more on the wings there, which then lead into Poe's markings, as well as where we have our spring-loaded shooters there next to the physical cannons on the ship. Moving it a little bit back, we'll get to the underside in a little bit, we can see the engines back here, which have a little bit of pink sticking out of them, but they do look very good nonetheless. They do fall out a little bit, so you want to be a little bit careful. Also, we have some rubber bands for the mechanism. You can see that one of these was replaced because they do wear out over time. This is a set from 2016 or so, so it is a little bit older, which is why You want to make sure that everything is a little bit up to date. So you may have to replace the rubber bands after some time, but it shouldn't be that big of a deal. We also have the same pattern mimicked over on this side with a little bit of sticker detailing as well, like we saw on this side. Now there is a slot for BB-8. You just pop him in there, and he's good to go with a main pilot seat there, with a little bit of a computer and an antenna there. If we can just find Poe, we can put him in there, and he can fly the X-Wing, because we are going to need him in there to demonstrate the next little bit of features. So putting him in there. You do also have a slot for his little blaster that he gets, which is pretty cool. You know that they thought about having some extra storage in there. Now, of course, if you want to fire out one of these, you simply just press back and it'll eventually fire, potentially getting lost. The spring-loaded shooters, meanwhile, you just kind of place them in there. It is a little bit more difficult with one hand, but you want to place them in there, make sure that they're locked in, and then you just kind of press down, firing them out and losing them to who knows where. And that's kind of the gist of the play features for at least the arm cannons. Now, there is another thing that you can do. You can twist this nozzle. It is going to be, you preferably want to pick this up when you do it, but you can do it. However, it's not advised that you try to do this without both of your hands. If we flip it over, now that it's got its S foils out, we can see that there's a little bit less detailing on the back or underside. No real sticker details except for the rims around these engines. And then it flows back to having a little bit of landing gears here with one main one here right at the end, which is retractable, so that you can retract it in there, and then you can just have it in attack formation to either blast up your Tatooine display or the City of Lanterns, whichever one's your choice. But I hope you enjoyed this review. This covers the Poe Dameron's X-Wing quite nicely. It's definitely a really nice looking X-Wing, and one that I do recommend seeing, as I did specifically choose this one over the Resistance one, which I could have purchased at the time. However, this one is much better than the regular Resistance one, even though it is a named character's ship. But the design and color just really help it out so much compared to other X-Wings. And I think that this is definitely better than the one that we saw recently, which was his newer redesigned one after this one was unfortunately blown up. But I hope you did enjoy. See you next time. Bye.